Welcome back, everybody, to Niners Now. I'm your host, Brady Grustas, at GrustasBrady on X. You can follow me there. And today we've got some more 49ers roster moves before the recap of the Niners joint practice with the Raiders on Thursday. And of course, stick around until later in the show because I want to go over my first 53-man roster predictions. But before we begin, go ahead and subscribe down below, leave a like, leave a comment, and let's get into it. So let's get these roster moves out of the way quickly. The Niners announced on Wednesday that they put edge rusher Bradley Anae on injured reserve, which will end his season. And that's tough to hear. Anae was not a lock for the 53-man roster, but he had a great day versus the Broncos last Saturday. And to replace him, the team brought in Damone Harris and William Bradley King, two edge rushers. Damone Harris is a 270-pound edge rusher who's more of a run defender, I would say. He's a big guy with long arms. He's been in the league since 2018, but he's never recorded a sack, and he's only started one game. But he's certainly been around the block, and he should be a pretty decent camp body to help the team get through the preseason healthy. On the other end of the spectrum, William Bradley King is a little bit lighter and more explosive at roughly 260 pounds, and he has not played in an NFL game since 2022. But he has been employed. He spent his first 2 years in Washington before he signed with the Patriots and Dolphins in back-to-back years. So both of these guys are going to add some depth and maybe impress enough to make the practice squad. To make room for William Bradley King and Damone Harris, the Niners cut D tackle Michael Dwumfor and put offensive tackle Andre Dillard on season-ending IR. The 49ers' journey ended as soon as it began for Dillard, and it looks like Spencer Burford is for sure going to make this roster now. I also think this increases the chance that Austin Pleasance makes the team at right tackle. Our depth at tackle is not very good at all. I hope that Colton McKivitz can stay healthy. I mean, we know that Trent Williams will miss a few games like he does every year, but we can't have a regular season game where we start both Spencer Burford and Austin Pleasance. I just will not have it. So anyways, what happened at joint practice yesterday with the Raiders? Well, of course, we got to start out with the injuries as always. Nick Bosa's got some neck soreness. The team is expecting him back next week, but assuming that Bosa's not going to play on Saturday. Ben Barch was out yesterday and will be out Saturday with his elbow injury. Trey Brown and Jason Pinnock both have heel injuries, and they're questionable to play on Saturday as well. And Upton Stout, Mykel Williams, Renardo Green, and Yetur Gross-Matos were all working out on the side field on Thursday. Looks like they're all getting closer and closer to their return. Hopefully all four of those guys will be back next week. The Niners were missing their entire starting defensive line, meaning Nick Bosa, Jordan Elliott, Kevin Givens, and Mykel Williams. They were also missing half of their backup defensive line and some of their third-string defensive line on yesterday. So it was certainly a little bit rough for the 49ers D-line versus the Raiders. More on that later, though. The biggest injury news from yesterday was that the Niners dodged another bullet. Standout rookie defensive tackle CJ West went down during 1v1 drills and was favoring his left knee. And it looked ugly at first, but he was able to walk off the field under his own power. And just like we saw with Mykel Williams, it looks like West has hyperextended his knee. Hopefully both of those guys are able to come back healthy and play in the preseason game versus the Chargers next week, because any reps that those guys can get will help them out tremendously. Now, we should consider ourselves very fortunate that neither Mykel Williams or CJ West injured any of those tendons or ligaments in their knee, particularly the ACL. That'd be the big one. But what about the guys that did play on Thursday? Let's talk about who impressed during a pretty evenly matched practice. It was much more close than the Broncos practice last week. It looked like both the Niners and the Raiders got some big plays off in this one. Camp standout Chase Lucas was playing with both the first and second team defenses at nickel cornerback, like he did in last week's preseason game. And he had a really nice day. He had an interception on Aiden O'Connell. I believe that was the only interception of the day. Lucas is getting closer and closer to locking up a 53-man roster spot, in my opinion. I think he's been the best backup cornerback on the entire team. Speaking of camp standouts, wide receiver Russell Gage put in work against the Raiders' young cornerbacks in 1v1 drills, just like he's done all camp long. Fred Warner also really showed off. He stuck with speedy wide receiver Trey Tucker down the field and forced a throwaway. There's not many guys in this league who can hang with Tucker's speed, and none of the guys who can play linebacker. Warner also had a pass breakup on Brock Bowers, and he drilled rookie wide receiver Dante Thornton over the middle of the field. Now, the Niners offense as a whole had some nice chunk plays. Ricky Pearsall, Christian McCaffrey, Kyle Juszczyk, even Braden Willis made a couple of big plays down the field. And on defense, the Niners secondary was pretty locked down to start. They kept Geno Smith contained and restricted to these short dump-off throws. But the Raiders did get a few bigger plays towards the end of practice, including a long touchdown to the aforementioned Trey Tucker. Usually the Niners' front seven is the unit that's making a lot of noise, but yesterday it was the back seven that was really performing, largely due to, in part, that defensive line being decimated by injuries. Although with the second unit, Raiders backup quarterback Aiden O'Connell was under a lot of pressure. So shout out to the 49ers backups for making it happen, even under some dire circumstances. It was a really hot day out in Las Vegas, practicing outside, and things were getting a little chippy. Kyle Shanahan talked in his press conference after practice about how they knew that the Raiders will be looking to start fights, in particular Max Crosby. He's known for doing that. And Kyle really emphasized to the team that any sort of scuffles would hurt the team in a long way. And I'm sure that message applies for Saturday's game as well. And although the special teams period got a little close to breaking out into a fight with former 49er, I should say, Raheem Mostert, talking a lot of smack, there were no fights that officially broke out. A big win for the Niners on that front. Speaking of that Kyle Shanahan press conference, he was clearly in a pretty good mood. He was joking and laughing a lot more than usual, I feel like. Maybe he was quite impressed with the team, and maybe he's looking forward to Saturday's game. I know I am. That's it for the joint practice recap. Now we're on to the game. Let me know in the comments how you think the Niners will do on Saturday against the Raiders. Now, for our next segment, it is always very fun to keep track of the roster as it is right now, right? All 90 players. But we got to remember that almost 40 of these players are getting cut. So let's take a look at what this roster may look like once it gets down to 53. And again, this is just my best guess. Things can absolutely change, and they probably will from now until week 1. So let's start with the quarterbacks, where I've just got Brock Purdy and Mac Jones making the team. I've said it before on this channel, but neither Carter Bradley or Tanner Mordecai are good enough to be on a 53-man roster. I mean, they're barely good enough to be on a 90-man roster. I'm sure that one of them will end up on the Niners practice squad, most likely Bradley, but this feels pretty safe to me. I think we only see 2 quarterbacks make the 53-man team. And of course, this is assuming that Curtis Rourke is placed on season-ending injured reserve or the PUP list or something like that where he will not count against the 53-man roster. Now at running back, this one's also pretty chalk. I've got Christian McCaffrey, Isaac Guerendo, Jordan James, and Patrick Taylor Jr. on the roster. I'm also including Kyle Juszczyk as a running back, and he will be making the team for sure. CMC, Guerendo, and James are all pretty much locks to me. McCaffrey and Guerendo will be the primary 1-2 punch as long as they're both healthy. And I expect James to pick up steam over the course of the year and eventually get more involved in the offense in specific situations. And Patrick Taylor Jr. has quietly had a really nice training camp. He's shut down any doubters who thought he might not make the team this year. So the guys who would be left off the team at running back are Jeff Wilson, Corey Kiner, and Keyshawn Vaughn. Although I could totally see a world where Jeff Wilson makes the roster, there just wasn't room for him, really. I don't think the Niners are going to keep 5 running backs and a fullback on this team. Although I expect at least one of Wilson, Kiner, and Vaughn to be on the 49ers practice squad. At wide receiver now, I'm going to go with the assumption that Brandon Ayuk is on the PUP list, which would mean that he doesn't count against that 53-man limit, and that Demarcus Robinson and Jawan Jennings are both available. Those are some big ifs, for sure, I will admit, but that's how I've got it right now. Just makes it a little easier for me, I think. So at receiver, I've got Ricky Pearsall, Jawan Jennings, Demarcus Robinson, Jacob Cowing, Jordan Watkins, and Junior Bergen. I do think that as of right now, Bergen makes this team. We didn't have a legitimate return specialist last year, and I think Bergen could certainly be that guy this year. With Brant Boyer now in the fold and the added emphasis on special teams already taking effect, I think Bergen is going to make this 53-man roster. Now, unfortunately, that does mean that Russell Gage, Tariq Owens, Isaiah Hodgins, Robbie Chosen, and Malik Turner all get cut. Choosing between Gage and Bergen for that last spot was extremely tough. I think if Robinson ends up suspended or if Jennings has to take a short stint on the PUP list, I think Gage is going to get that open spot, no questions asked. But right now, the return flexibility is important, and I think that gives Bergen the edge. For tight ends, this one's nice and simple. I'm going to go with George Kittle, Luke Farrell, and Jake Tonjes. Not very much to say here. Those were the top three guys going into camp, and I think that they are still the top three, meaning that Ross Dwelly and Braden Willis get cut. Willis is definitely trending up. He had a good day versus the Raiders, but I just think that Tonjes is a better player. Now let's go to the offensive line, where the 49ers tend to keep 9 on their active roster, and I'm going to go with 9 as well. Trent Williams, Ben Barch, Jake Brendel, Dominic Pooney, and Colton McKivitz as the 5 starters. And for the backups, I've got Spencer Burford, Connor Colby, Matt Hennessy, and Austin Pleasance. Now, all camp long, the 49ers have seemingly abandoned the quote-unquote swing tackle position. Spencer Burford has been playing left tackle and left tackle only, and Austin Pleasance has been playing right tackle and right tackle only. So I have them both making the roster instead of just one guy playing both backup tackle positions. And on the interior, we see that Nick Sakel and Drew Moss unfortunately do not make this team, with Connor Colby beating them both out for that backup guard spot. I'll tell you right now, Drew Moss was the last cut that I made when putting this list together. I really think that it is so close with Moss, but I keep coming back to this one thing. I don't know how the 49ers keep 5 backup offensive linemen. That's just never been their tendency. You can't spend 10% of your roster spots on backup offensive linemen. It just doesn't work. Also missing out on the 53, I have Isaac Alarcon, Isaiah Prince, and Drake Nugent. On to the defense now. Let's start with the defensive line. At edge rusher, I've got Nick Bosa, Mykel Williams, Bryce Huff, Sam Aquanu, and Robert Beal. That 5th spot is a really tricky one, but I went with the guy who's been with the team a while over the newer additions like Jonathan Garvin, Jalen Allen, Trevis Gibson, William Bradley King, and Damone Harris. You may also notice I have Yetur Gross-Matos not making this team. Like I talked about in yesterday's video, whether he ends up on injured reserve or he's straight up cut, I think that Gross-Matos is close to losing his place on this roster. And with the defensive tackles, I have Jordan Elliott, Kalia Davis, CJ West, Alfred Collins, and Sebastian Valdez making the team. This is assuming that Kevin Givens is on the PUP list with his pec injury, so that opens up an extra spot there. Now, one of the biggest surprises here in my predictions is that Evan Anderson does not make this team. I think he certainly could, and I like Anderson a whole lot, but Sebastian Valdez has been so good lately that I don't know how you leave him off this roster. That's for sure going to be a battle to watch going forward. So I've got 3 rookies defensive tackles making the team in Collins, West, and Valdez. The one guy on the outside is unfortunately Bruce Hector. Now at linebacker, I'm going to keep Fred Warner, D. Winters, Luke Gifford, Nick Martin, and Tatum Bethune. This feels pretty easy to me. It sucks to let go of Curtis Robinson. I mean, he was awesome last year in the preseason, and he's the reigning Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee for the 49ers, but his long-term upside is lower than Nick Martin's and Tatum Bethune's, and I think that he's gotten thoroughly outplayed this summer by Luke Gifford. So I just think it's time to cut Curtis Robinson. Along with Robinson, I will be cutting Chaz Surratt, Stone Blanton, and Jalen Graham. Over to cornerback now. I'm going to keep 6 corners here. Diamador Lenore, Renardo Green, Upton Stout, Dallas Flowers, Chase Lucas, and Jacob Robinson. Chase Lucas has really played his way into a roster spot, as we talked about before, especially in that first preseason game. Getting a safety in the preseason as a cornerback it's pretty impressive. It puts you on the map. Also, having a veteran nickel corner on the roster to help Upton Stout along, I think is the right move, especially with Stout dealing with a little bit of calf tightness. And for the backup outside guys, I think that right now, Dallas Flowers and Jacob Robinson are the best performing guys in that competition. I think that Darrell Luter has been awful during training camp, and Trey Brown hasn't been a whole lot better. They don't get roster spots for free. They call it a competition for a reason. So I went with Dallas Flowers and Jacob Robinson. And also, this does mean that Fabian Moreau is cut. At special teams, I'm just keeping the obvious, right? Jake Moody, John Weeks, Thomas Morstead. We don't have to talk about that, which means that we have 4 spots left at safety. And I'm bringing in those 4 spots Marcus Siegel, Jason Pinnock, Richie Grant, and Saron Neal. Gasp. Yes, that does mean that I'm cutting Jair Brown. And believe it or not, it was a little close between him and Richie Grant. I think Saron Neal is going to make this roster in some way. He's just too good on special teams. And unfortunately, he doesn't play a whole lot of defensive snaps anymore. So having only 3 real safeties on the roster is certainly not ideal. But I think that the 3 best safeties on this team, besides Malik Mustafa, who I have on the PUP list, are Siegel, Pinnock, and Grant. So that's who I went with. Unfortunately, that does mean that Derek Canteen and Jalen Mahoney also get cut along with Jair Brown. So to review, I've got 2 UDFAs making this roster in Sebastian Valdez and Jacob Robinson. I have 10 of the 11 draft picks making the team, with Curtis Rourke being the only one who's missing out, and he's injured, so that makes sense. Some of the notable cuts I had were Evan Anderson, Jair Brown, Russell Gage, Curtis Robinson, and Drew Moss. Do you think that those guys are going to make the team? What do you think of the 53-man roster that I put together? Could that team win the division? I sure hope so. Let me know down below what your takeaways from Raiders joint practice are as well. As always, leave a comment, leave a like, and let me know if there's any topics that you'd like to see me cover. Thank you all for watching, and subscribe for 49ers videos 5 days a week. I'm Brady Grustas, Grustas Brady on X. This has been Niners Now, and I'll see you next week.